Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the ambition that I'm going to focus on today is branding thyself. And I'm going to use myself as my own case study. The writer Anthony Trollope once said that people will take you at your own reckoning. How do you see yourself? How do you position your own goals within the context of the tough world that we live in and try to stake our claim within? Everyone's talking about how today's economy is fueled by attention. Attention is more valuable than gold, crypto, any form of currency. How does one knock on, climb over, break through the wall, the tsunami of so much content that's being hurled into everyone's face? This highlights the need for branding, brand strategy, branding and differentiation. How do we cut a piece out of everyone's attention bandwidth? Everyone is hyper saturated with content. The last thing anyone is really asking for is another celebrity somebody. And at the same time, they would be eager, thrilled to embrace somebody new, a new brand that triggers the dopamine like nobody else does, like no other product or service can do. This is the paradox of living in our time, that everyone is blasted by media and at the same time kind of bored. It's same old, and yet we're all addicted. It's as if the heroin just isn't doing it for us like it used to. We'd be the very first to leap on anything we could pump into that syringe, but we have no idea what it is. It's got to be presented to us, and our first little taste might not be satisfying. In fact, that first little nibble might not be satisfying at all. Things that are new, things that are exciting, things that break the mold, that are disruptive, often turn people off at first blush because it doesn't fit into the box of their comfort. I've quoted the brilliant designer Louis a few times before. He was the guy who brought us the Avante automobile, the first automobile that was asymmetrical. Beautiful car, limited run. He transformed Esso, the oil company, into Exxon. And he's got a long string of amazing successes in the branding space. The guy was a genius. He wore nice suits, too. And he had this epic phrase that resonates throughout the ages, especially for someone trying to gain attention, sustain it, grow an audience. And that is Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. So it's walking that tightrope, folks, between excitement, thrilling people, and not freaking them out to the point that they don't reject your innovation outright. Now, I am going off on this, and I'm decided to explore this subject because I've taken a mirror to my own approach to content creation in this age of endless content creation. The pool of content creators is almost as vast as consumers. That's an exaggeration, but if you think about it, just about everyone's creating their own content. Mean comments on YouTube inclusive. Everyone's got a phone. We check it hundreds of times per day. The new technology devices are trying to make this as seamless as possible. The integrated augmented reality glasses, the Ray-Ban and Meta Facebook partnerships, the resurrection of Google Glass. Remember that device from years ago? It was ahead of its time, just like the Apple Newton. But we will see a resurgence and a revolution in devices that more seamlessly integrate the digital and real worlds. And that's out of necessity, spurned by convenience and this reality that we're all constantly consuming and creating content in this endless feedback loop that's now being further reinforced and distorted and accentuated by artificial intelligence. Sora 2 had a big blow up and blow out the last couple weeks. I've been playing around with it. I have podcasted and ranted about it. Fascinating. In a sense, it brings the multiverse into everyone's hands, limitless possibility, starring you, the content creator. So, again, what does this mean for someone like moi? Let me give a little bit of context here and explain why I'm focused on this afternoon. It's a Thursday, October 16th. I have to check. I have published over 450 blogs on the platform Medium. I have my own website, Mookie's Multi-verse. It's a little bit neglected. Nobody cares about websites. I've got 5 published books on Amazon, an illustrated satirical holiday series I did in partnership with an illustrator friend of mine, and The Book of My Dreams, new science fiction novel, first in a series. I have been doing video rants, vlogs, on a daily basis almost, covering all sorts of topics, posting on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I've got a Patreon page. I am a content creator, and especially over the last year, I have blossomed out into multimedia, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. Where I shine is in endless creativity. I can't shut the hell up. I've always got an opinion about everything. I am very well read, and I've got a great way of taking complicated stuff that often confuses people and simplifying it into a good story. On this pod, just like all my other pods, I have no script. I don't even have an outline. I just turn the mic on and off I go to the races. I'm sure many of my bloviations could be sincerely and severely edited for professional quality. But so what? Joe Rogan interviews somebody for 3.5 hours and it meanders all over the place. And many TikTokers are just horrible with production, and bad production values have become their own aesthetic. I've talked about that before too. So the old standards are kind of out the window, and it's foolish of me to appraise my stuff based on its inherent quality because the benchmark itself is kind of sketchy. And that's not really the point. The focus isn't so much on content and its quality, appraised one way or another, but reach, engagement, and conversion. The old marketing triptych, where you essentially are out here to build a community. So I've got all of this content, and once again, 450 blogs, 5 books, equivalent to over 1,000 published pages in print on Kindle. I'm working on the audiobook for the new science fiction novel. And then I've got well over 1,000 videos, me covering all these topics. I'm on Substack too, by the way. So where I shine is in cranking content. And I've just come to the realization, however overdue and relatively absurd given the focus of this podcast on consultative selling and brand identity, reaching audiences whom you understand, I am coming to the obvious realization that I suck at marketing myself. And although that sounds damning to a person who's made a career in marketing and PR, it's not at all surprising. I've worked in multiple professional advertising, PR, marketing agencies. I've worked with agencies that do professional branding. I've worked with teams who are professional branders, and they've all done a good to great job branding and marketing their clients. But when the mirror is turned back to the agency, to the brander, usually these folks do a terrible job of branding themselves. I've been in countless agency brainstorms that prove to be the most frustrating creative sessions and meetings in my career in marketing and branding. It's hard to do it when the attention is focused on oneself. All objectivity is lost, emotions get in the way, and sometimes your own expertise shoots you in the foot. And you become de facto a kind of perfectionist because you know how good it can get, and then you look at yourself in the mirror and think it sucks. It's the common problem with creators and artists in general, and it's exponentially magnified in a team setting, in an agency situation where you're just used to calling the shots and the client is the one being educated. They might not always listen to your advice or apply your recommendations, but at the very least, there's an acknowledgement of expertise. That's why they hired you, that's why they pay you. So when branding agencies and marketing firms take it upon themselves to brand themselves, update their company website, create messaging, put that into business development and sales pitch decks, integrate that into sales pitches, it's usually a mess because it's on spec, egos get in the way, and it's just hard to know what you're good at in a way that's in any way objective and in any way that is more sensitive to your audience than your own conception of yourself. That's the real problem in its core. So, whether I like it or not, or have acknowledged it or not, I suffer from this to the point where, given my avoidant emotional tendencies, I've just brushed this more or less to the side. I went to New York on a business meeting, wow, maybe about 6 months ago, maybe even longer. And I spent a few days there, and I'm in a hotel, and I'm just out of my usual element. And I come to the realization that I need to pretty much do everything I'm bloviating about here. That I've got tons of content churning in all of these modalities across all of these channels, and it's not really gluing together. It's not really cohesive. And when I even try to understand myself, let alone anyone being exposed to my stuff for the first time, they have no center point. They have no one piece or one sense of identity or perspective that nails it in a way that a brand identity could and should. It just doesn't really exist. And different people know me in different ways. And it's confusing and it's not gaining traction. So I decided that I would rename my YouTube channel The Mookie Spitz Show, since it just gobbled up all my content from my podcasts, from my essays to whatever, and then take things from there and start doing promotional reels and taking a more traditionally marketing externally focused focus. I did not. And I did not because I fell back to my lowest common denominator, which is my highest aspiration for just creating content. In James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, which no one has read. If someone tells you that they've read Finnegan's Wake, they're a liar. Even Ezra Pound, whose poems were absolutely incomprehensible, Ezra Pound wrote to Joyce telling him that, what the actual F is this book? Anyway, what I did get out of the book, or at least other people writing about the book, is that a lot of the plot is centered around two brothers, and their names are Shem and Shaun. Now, Shem, which is the root from what we get Semite to, the race, the ethnicity that is encompassing of both Jews and Arabs, by the way, feuding brothers to this day. Anyway, Shem is the writer. He is the creator of the word. He is the content creator. But he sucks at getting his own word out. He's great at creatively creating worlds, getting them down on paper. Shem's in his own damn head. Shem sees things no one else can see. And Shaun, his brother, is the exact opposite. It's a yin-yang kind of complementary situation. Shem creates nothing except woo. He's great with people. He disseminates ideas he otherwise doesn't understand. And his metrics of success and happiness are completely different than his brother's. So whereas Shem is toiling away and creating worlds and telling stories that no one otherwise would be eager to listen to or read about, Shaun is making connections, is in the pub, is having a great time building networks, forging communities, but is utterly really devoid of any actual message. So what Joyce was trying to do is to really kind of highlight that dichotomy, and we each have it within our own hearts and minds. We've got aspects of ourselves that are more conventionally introverted, if you will, more internal, more creative, and then we've got aspects that are more extroverted in the sense of looking out into the world and getting energy that way. So in this schemata, I'm definitely Shem. Regardless of my Myers-Briggs, I love to create content. I live for it. I love turning on that hot mic and just going for it like I am now. I do the same, typing manically at 90 words a minute. I've got my old beaten up Amazon Basics keyboard covered in filth and dust. And if I haven't typed 3 million keystrokes on this thing, I haven't typed a single one. It's got awful feel to it. It's like hammering on my desk, and I love it. I love to do this. If I had my own way with things, I would do it all day. But I've had pressure points. One pressure point is monetization. I've incurred, let's just say, a disastrous personal balance sheet over the last 2-3 years, so I could do more and more of this manic content creation. Hot mics, beaten up keyboards, Wi-Fi bandwidth. We're looking at 1 terabyte of content being shared with the world every month. I love it. Videos, blogs, novels, podcasts, blah, blah. Shem all the way. And then, I sit down and I share it. But my sharing is the sharing of a Shem. It's reckless. It's not really sensitive to any audience. And it's just kind of screaming at the world without any real interest or sensitivity to the audience. I'm just throwing it out there. And that feels good too. Part of me is I just don't like it that much. Part of me is I'd rather spend the time on the actual content creation And part of me is, my job is done, but I nonetheless do it. See, it begs the question of at least wanting to create some community, since I do bother to do it, and I gain great satisfaction from the actual sharing, if not the engagement. So this is who I am, and I'm sure anyone listening who's a content creator falls somewhere within this spectrum, and I'm illustrating that I'm like a Shem like Shaun, or a Shaun like Shem. That's probably more accurate, where I've got elements of both, the classic Gemini here for whatever it's worth. And I have this two sides to my personality too, which is when you see me in person, I'm like I am now, just da 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 da. I love parties, I love going out, I could talk to anybody, a homeless person or the Pope. But if it really came down to it, I would do what I'm doing right now, which is spending most of my time in isolation, most of my time creating content, and really loving most of my time. So I should feel blessed, and I do. But what's wanting here, and what's propelling this podcast, and which is what's giving me a sense of urgency, some fire under my ass, is that I've been missing something. And people don't do anything unless they have to. And just as the dissolution, the creative dissolution of my partnership, that illustrator that I mentioned with whom I did the illustrated holiday novel, we were ostensibly set to cooperate on much more content. And I moved to California from New York City just to be a mile away from this guy so we could be a creative partnership and tag team, kind of like Matt and Trey of South Park. But for complicated reasons, and reasons that are probably more common than not, that partnership did not work out. So realizing that I'm on my own to create content, it didn't stop me from continuing to what I'd been doing when I was with him, which is just nonstop working. But I found myself without a partner and kind of looking at myself and reevaluating who I was and what I was doing. And I shifted to two things. I shifted to the video ranting, which I hadn't really indulged with before, and I shifted to the podcasting. And it's been fabulous. So what I'm illustrating here is necessity is indeed the mother of invention. And I went multimodal in a big way after this relationship, which ostensibly was built around writing and publishing illustrated novels, blew up. And that got me to podcasting and video sharing. And now I am sitting here and wondering about the next phase of this thing. And after doing it for about a year, I started the video ranting in December and the podcasting in February of this year. So as I'm coming around the bend of about a year with all of this content, and without really reaching the tipping point, I haven't. I've got my followers, and I've got people interested, but I haven't built up critical mass. I don't have my Mookie minions, my Spitzeratis. Do I want those? I think I could live very well without them, be the Tom and Pynchon-esque kind of guy where I just write. He had success fairly early. I think he was 27 when he published V. So he's been riding on that, but as we know, he's been stubbornly reclusive. I understand why, because it could be very distracting, these things called people. But that's the lifeblood. That's where a lot of the heart of literature comes from, I think. But I'm sitting here this Thursday afternoon because I have a bunch of other work to do. I have work to do that's not really related to my creative self. And that gets me to thinking, which is after almost a year of doing this and not really popping it in terms of flipping my content into anything remotely monetizable, I am asking myself why, knowing the answer. And I'm starting to think that now is the time, with this big body of content churned out really over the last year in the form of video and podcasts, the multimedia aspect of this, that I've got my chops, I've got my experience, and I've got an opportunity to ladder it up again, just like I laddered it up last year with these other modes, and take the marketing and the branding more seriously. Like, instead of my Substack being Mookie Spitz's Substack, I can do better than that. And what kind of common themes can I tie together to make my brand pop, to get people interested in me and what I have to say? And in so doing, and to do it, capturing the essence of my vibe, my point of view, in a way where people immediately get it and want a part of it. Right now, it's who is this Mookie Spitz guy? You see a podcast show called Bald Ambition. Well, yeah, okay. No hair, all heart. That's funny. Bald and bloviating. Okay. Each fits thematically with what they are, but there's no umbrella. We used to say in branding that there's a house of brands or a branded house. And right now I've got a house of brands: my podcasts, my blog, my Substack, my Patreon, my TikTok, Mookie Writer on TikTok. I mean, what the actual F? Instagram is Insta Spitz. YouTube is the Mookie Spitz Show. This is awful from a branding point of view. It is one gigantic mess. If I wear my client hat and I would get a statement of work and a response to a proposal here, and actually go to work for myself as a marketing and PR expert, knowing what I know now, it's not even so much about doing any paid advertising. It's just getting this chaotic house of brands together and create a brand identity, and laddering that up into something exciting that people can instantly respond to and understand. And that's on my mind now. And I think it's appropriate. This pod could have gone into the Bald and Bloviating podcast as an expression of just kind of bullshitting and winging it. That's where I put political rants and miscellaneous musings and even interviews. And it could have gone into the No Hair All Heart podcast, where I talk about emotions and feelings, what it means to be a creator, and where I'm at right now in my life. But I've put it into this Bald Ambition podcast as kind of a mea culpa meets self-referential, spontaneous workshop in brand identity. And what I've gotten to is this realization that maybe now's the time. Now's the time because I want to change it up a little bit. Now's the time because I was inspired almost randomly in this quantum universe by Liquid Death, that brand. You probably know what it is, because market saturation is like in a brand awareness is something like 34%. They are literally a bottled water company, only instead of bottled water in plastic bottles, they're in metal cans, closer to beer and energy drink. And their number one skill in going from 0 to $1.4 billion in valuation for basically just a can of fucking water. They don't even advertise the water. Like, what is it, Artesian Springs? It's in fact the opposite. It's a can of water. And it operated off the brand attributes of confusion and contrarian snarkiness. So while all those brands in the bottled water space were going for convenience, health, and whatever. I mean, I grew up where the idea that people would pay for bottled water would be what? Imagine like the 70s. You're growing up in the 70s, and somebody tells you that bottled water will be one of the biggest consumer product industries or verticals in our lifetimes. You'd be like, get the F out of here. What, bottled water? It's just water. And it became its thing, and it survived and it flourishes. Compare that to the fruit juices. Remember when Snapple was the hottest stock pick for a while, I think in the 90s. And then it just tanked. And everyone was saying that the newest thing, that bottled water was going away because it's just a bottle of water, for Christ's sakes. Snapple and these fruit juices would be the thing. And the stock went through the roof, and then it tanked. And now the companies and fruit juices, they're still there, but they're marginal. Nothing compares to bottled water. I think it's bullshit. And millions of people, at least in the back of their mind, think it's bullshit too. So the genius behind liquid death is you start with that hunch, that feeling, that tickle in your brain that this entire industry is bullshit. And then you flip it on its head. So you get away from the plastic recyclable bottles, right? So plastic is always a problem, and then a lot of them go have the big recycle symbol, and they talk about purity and infusion of vitamins and all this crap, right? So they turn that on its head. They go from a plastic bottle to a can, like a beer can or an energy drink can. And then they give it the opposite kind of name, from, Poland Springs, Aquafina. Get out of here. It's liquid death because you're dying of thirst. Wow, this does not make any sense. And then they run ads where you have surgeons and pilots on an airplane and cops drinking on the job. And they're drinking from what looks like a beer can, but don't worry, it's just water. It's meta bullshit. Bottled water is bullshit. And they one up the bullshit of bottled water with their own brand of self-referential meta bullshit. They call bullshit on bullshit with bullshit. That is liquid death. I had the opportunity to interact with a guru here in California, and that's a topic for a whole separate pod, I'm sure. And I remember he was talking about health and wellness. He's in the yogi position, and all of his minions are gathered around. And he brought up this idea that there's this product called liquid death, that he was somewhere and he saw liquid death, and he said that that's absolutely abhorrent to your energies and your chakras, and you should stay away from something like that. It's trouble when they say liquid death. And apparently a lot of his fans didn't even know what the brand was. And I mentioned that I was very familiar with it, going to death metal shows, and everyone kind of laughed. And I remember my first exposure to it was a show in New York. It was one of my favorites, the Scandinavian death metal and black metal bands. I was seeing In Flames or Within Temptation or one of those bands in New York. I went into the little bar area of the Gramercy Club on in Gramercy in Manhattan. And they had Liquid Death there. And at first, I thought that it was an energy drink. But then I was a little confused because the can was a little bit corrugated and it looked like a beer can. And then I find out that it's just water. And then I was amused. This was my first exposure to the brand, actually. And I was amused. And I was actually pretty thirsty. And I go, it's just water? And they go, yeah, it's just water, man. I go, you know what? I'll take one. And then I'm drinking a Liquid Death. Well, that's it. It worked. It worked for me at first blush. That is an awesome brand, even though it's stupid and confusing and doesn't make sense. Why does it cut through the clutter? Because it's stupid, it's confusing, it doesn't make sense. I think one of their early campaigns, they took a bunch of online criticism where people were posting mean comments that the brand was bullshit, it didn't make sense, and they were a bunch of pussies for launching it, and took those and turned the negative comments into punk and rock and presumably death metal albums with lyrics and covers. Once again, it's doing this Tai Chi move of taking what you get and throwing it back out there, which perfectly matched their brand identity of cynicism, confusion, and super contrarian meta bullshit. I love that. So this resonates for me in so many ways because they did what I so desperately need to do with my own personal brand identity. I need to create a persona for Mookie Spitz, which is similarly impactful. And the themes of Liquid Death are actually many of the themes that I capture in all the stuff that I rant about, write about, and pod about. I'm cynical. I'm contrarian. I force people, if they pay attention, to rethink what they've been thinking about, to take a fresh look at stuff. And because I cover so many bases and because I shift gears often so rapidly, because my stuff is so spontaneous and unpolished, you get a lot of disorientation, you get a lot of confusion, but at the same time, you get this gut feeling, at least I think so, that it comes from my heart, that I'm really trying to make the world a better place and at least understand it better. And I'm really clutching and fighting and scraping and shouting to get at some kind of truth, even if most people have dismissed that as even being a worthwhile or possible enterprise. So this Liquid Death analogy works for me in just so many ways. It's we share a commonality of attitude and contrarian thinking and kind of whiz bang, throw it against the wall. Don't be afraid to be provocative. If you want to say it, just say it and go for it sensibility. And I don't see why I can't or shouldn't do what they have done. Not exactly copying the model, but being inspired by their success. And I'm thinking to myself that so many folks have managed to get the attention and build some kind of community, frankly, with limited to zero talent. Many folks are just copycats, if not most of them. And I have this kind of why not attitude. And my biggest pain point and source of friction is just my own predisposition to not give a shit. I don't care until I have to care. And what inspires me the most is that is certainly at least big part rationalization. Because I was comfortable a bug in a rug just writing my books and writing my blogs. I was a typist. And then I lost my creative partner. And I had to recalibrate what my deliverables to the world are really about. They're not a series of books, illustrated novels in various forms covering various stories and genres, which was what the vision was allegedly going to be. Now I'm on my own. I have carte blanche, and the money is tight. The money's running out. The money has run out, and I need to reinvent myself. And I reinvented myself by doing what I probably should have done years ago, which is just grab my phone, put it in selfie mode, in video, and hit record. And it's been absolutely glorious. And then after a month or so of doing that, I came to the realization after leaving people voice messages, some as long as 10, 15, 20 minutes on WhatsApp, that instead of podcasting for one person, I could just app up, figure it out, and blast the world with this stuff. Take it or leave it. And I'm not looking back. It's been awesome. Have I turned into Mark Maron or Joe Rogan? No, but right time, right place. I'm the wrong time, wrong place, but who cares? I'm doing it with just endless enthusiasm, and I feel like I'm just getting started. So I think the foundation's there. And now, to the point I was making earlier, there's a renewed sense of need, which is I'm doing all this, but the money is still tight. The money is still in the negative numbers. I need to work. I need to do my marketing and PR consulting, which is a labor of love also. But if I could have my way, if I could snap my fingers, if I could jump into Johnny Fazzuli's transfinite reality engine, make that wish, and be teleported to a universe in the infiniverse where my wish just happens to be true, then what I would wish would be I would just do what I'm doing right now and at least make enough money just from this to keep doing this. That is a goal. And I've been telling friends, family, some colleagues, former colleagues, that ultimately that would be a win. I'm not looking to be famous or almost famous. And frankly, the Shem in me is still going strong. There's a very powerful I don't give a shit approach here, which is I am perfectly content just turning on the mic and typing and recording myself ranting in my kitchen. I'm perfectly fine with that. And when I do interact with folks online, it's usually unpleasant because I'm getting a lot of negative, I'm getting likes, but a lot of negative comments, and people don't seem to understand me or care, let alone watch the whole damn video. I get it. And I'm getting toughened up and amused by it. That was another podcast I did a couple days ago, The Use of Abuse. So I love it. This is great, like Tony Tiger says. But I am feeling it. I'm feeling the need to take my own personal branding seriously. And I need to start applying the exercises that I apply to clients to myself. And that begins with understanding the audience. Who is the audience? And I'm thinking my audience is kind of folks like me, people who love to read, people who love information, people who are smart, informed, curious, and also embracing contrarian attitudes, not taking what they hear with a grain of salt, not affiliating themselves with a particular party, and going topic by topic and really coming to understand our world and each other and ourselves through this lens of critical thinking and being able to put one's own emotions to the side. That it's not about being tribal And it's not just about barfing back what one has heard from one's tribal leaders, and actually being an independent thinking person trying to understand the world, and is also frustrated by all the nonsense and stupidity and cruelty and violence, and would really love for the world to be a better place, but knowing at the same time, frankly, that most people are shitty, that we're probably only going to make baby steps, and if we do, it'll be one crawl forward and three back. But at the same time, life is wonderful. It's all about the lived experience. And it's not about victimization or self-victimization, but it's about celebrating the amazing reality that we live in this unbelievably complicated, variegated, exciting world. And it's really all up to us to kind of try to figure it out, be creative and have fun along the way, and engage in rational dialogue where we have nuanced conversations to share ideas, inspire each other, and maybe through all that, make at least our worlds a better place. That's my audience. And I just pulled it out of my ass. And for that reason, it probably rings true. That's number one. And then number two is, what am I offering? Well, I'm offering all of this stuff, everything from short stories and screenplays and novels to short, medium, and long form blogs. I have political commentaries. I have reels talking about Jeff Bezos and math and politics and invading Venezuela, and I would say just about anything under the sun. But I think if you did a machine learning analysis, I probably have my focal points of attention, right? But I love talking about almost everything, and doing so with this cynical, analytical, and most importantly, humorous attitude. I've got about 40 reels of stand-up bits, which amounts to, I'm looking at almost like an hour and a half of content just in comedy. And I just keep going and going and going. So I am prolific. I'm funny. I'm cynical. I really try to explain and understand. And I'm also self-deprecating and self-focused. So it is about me. When I interview people on podcasts, I'm a gracious host and I get all into their stuff. And I love the dialogue. But my line of questioning is very Spitzian. It's very biting. It's to the point. I don't placate. I don't bullshit. I get to the heart of what they're trying to do and the benefit that they're providing the listener or society, or even the library of human accomplishments and ideas. So I'm a curator and I'm an interviewer, but I'm mostly a bloviator. So what happens when you put a bow on this and you add it all up? The Mookie Spitz show is a pretty good description of what I'm doing, but who the hell is Mookie Spitz? And how is he different than the other shows? And how do I capture this idea that I am cynical yet still very much engaged? That I'm smart, but I'm also irreverent? That I embrace the spontaneous and sloppy, yet I do my homework? That I am your partner in chaotic crime, but also in gaining a deep understanding of why things are the way they are, and doing it through this engine of self-actualization, celebration, and, in a sense, anti-victimization. No pity, no name calling. I don't think I'm mean. Here's the other thing is I don't troll. That might explain why I haven't really caught fire in this incendiary internet climate, which is I don't polarize. It's not like I'm a MAGA minion frothing at the mouth for the Donald, and I'm not a progressive commie liberal. And if nothing else, I self-identify with a more libertarian feel. But I find them to be a little bit too cognitive and a little bit too removed from some of the visceral realities of actually engaging with the world and getting stuff done. Almost too intellectual if you really understand them. So this puts me into a unique bucket. Differentiation shouldn't be that hard because I'm already very different. But the problem is identification and labeling. And, in a sense, just branding my personal identity. Who the hell am I? How can I excite and grow this audience that I've identified? And do so in a way where I communicate this value proposition instantaneously in the same way that Liquid Death does. It's Liquid Death in that gothic script in a goddamn beer energy drink can, and it's just fucking water. I'm not just fucking water. I've got a lot going on here. My challenge is that I've got ambrosia, but my container sucks. Nobody knows how to handle it. Nobody even really knows what it is at first blush, and that's got to change. And I need to figure this out. And it's challenging again because it's about me. I'm turning the mirror on myself instead of my clients. But it's also difficult because I cross over. You've got, going back to Joe Rogan, Mark Maron, they're interviewers. They're not content creators. And then you have content creators who have ancillary kind of extensibility into the social sphere. But then it's driven by a singular point of view, usually. Like Barry Weiss was just promoted to editor-in-chief of CBS News after creating, basically, she just started with a Substack, The Free Press. And she hung her hat on the anti-woke backlash, which is, I was there, I jogged down Fifth Avenue, or actually up Fifth Avenue. I lived on New York's Lower East Side, and I jogged up Fifth Avenue through a war zone. Everything was boarded up. I made it all the way up to the edge of Central Park in this jog a day after the riots. And the entire Apple store was surrounded by a wall. It was like moated off. And then I looped around and went down, I think, Avenue of Americas over to Madison Park and the Lego store. And the Lego store was looted. Rioters had broken into the Lego store and they had already stolen all the Lego. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, I'm a day late. So I looked at this with a sense of humor, and it was an amazing time in America, but a lot of people got mad. And I had a complicated, nuanced point of view about all of this, and I could go for a whole hour just podcasting about my feelings of that day, and probably will. But this is the environment into which Barry Weiss started substacking, which is what had happened to America, where were our values, and she went for it. And she is Jewish in background, as am I, Barry Weiss. Mookie Spitz might be a little bit tougher call. And she's very pro-Israel. I am very nuanced about Israel, to say the least. So what I'm getting at is Barry Weiss had a very, very clear point of view, and she was anchored in values shared by millions of people, of which 1.5 million became her followers and subscribers on Substack. Astonishing. And she did an awesome job of being able to build her following based on having a very, very clear point of view that tapped right into the emotional vacuum that millions of people felt in the wake of this societal upheaval, right as the pandemic was shifting into who knew what crazy times. And she was at the right time, right place, right gal, and more power to her. Say what you will about that point of view, but her success was meteoric. And in my opinion, well deserved, because she's a maestro at doing what she does. So why have I been at 500 or so Substack followers and almost Zippo growth? I only grow if I go out there and I follow and subscribe other people. No one really comes to me. And that's because of all the reasons I've been ranting about. What the fuck is this? I mean, I'm up there talking about Trump's ICE policy, and then I make a few liberals happy and trigger all the MAGA folks. And then I'm trying to understand Trump's foreign policy, and then I trigger the liberals, and the MAGA people are thrilled. And then I pontificate about Nietzsche, and I'm really just off the cuff shooting content all over the place based on my mood, and it's been great. I don't see any reason, and this I believe, I don't see any reason that I really need to change my content. I really don't think so. What I need to change is how I orient that content and position it to the world through the lens of a persona that captures my unique attributes. And I need to do that in a creative way, a fun way, in a way that I need to think just a little bit about, not a lot about. And I need to take things from there. But I do need to up my game and take this seriously. Why? Because that's the natural evolution of this. You build a content library. Look at Ezra Klein was a blogger for a long time. And by his own admission, he was never convinced that this would even escalate into a legitimate career. And he's evolved in a huge way. If you tracked him before, you could say that he was rather radically left and very impulsive. And if he didn't agree with you, he didn't really talk to you. I think that that's fair. He did engage in conversations and dialogue, the dialectic, but he was much more emotional back in the day and much more traditionally, if I'd say, leftist. And he's gone toward the center to the point of complimenting Charlie Kirk. After Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Ezra Klein stepped up and said, I didn't agree with the guy, and he said some trollish kind of shit, but he was doing what we purport to do as talking heads and communicators. We go out there and we engage people in dialogue, and we welcome critical thinking and debate. And the poor dude got wasted doing that. And Ezra Klein spoke up. And Ezra Klein has had a series of guests from both sides of the political aisle. And I did not like him in the past because he was very polarized and polarizing. When he was at Vox, I actually ran into him in the lobby of one of the buildings in FIDI. So I had a client, and this client I actually talk about in another podcast. I was working for an advocacy group, and it was in the same building as Vox Studios. And it's a random day, and it's lunch, and I'm coming back, and I almost bumped right into him. And it was the kind of thing, too, where I recognized him, and he's the celebrity. I'm not. He didn't know who I was, but he could tell that I recognized him. And he did that celebrity kind of throwback, which is, I know that you know that I know that you know who I am. And so what? What are you going to do about it? I don't have time for this shit. Whatever. And he turned and he got in the elevator, and I waited for mine. So that was my sharing of oxygen with Ezra Klein for maybe 3 seconds. And at that point, I was kind of on the fence with him. And I think he was on the fence with trying to figure out who he wanted to be as not just a blogger and a reactionary kind of thinker, but as an actual journalist. And I think he's masterfully made that jump. He has grown a beard, which is too bad. He has kind of a boyish, wafy look. And I know he's kind of hiding behind that. He's now got the sage beard going on. Hopefully he'll get over that. And I remember his podcast with Sam Harris when they were debating about the alleged racism of Douglas Murray. And Ezra was just abysmal on that podcast. That, I think, was the apex of his own polarization, I think. Because Sam had some good points, no matter how annoying Sam can be. And I've noticed that evolution. And the reason I bring it up, and I went on this long diatribe about Ezra Klein, is that in my own way, I feel like I'm evolving too. And it's an emotional evolution, even if cognitively you need to make steps earlier. It's like anything else, either in a positive direction or a negative one. You could have substance abuse issues and you've got a problem. But it might take months or years for you to finally fess up to it, address it, and then get through what you need to get through to get beyond it. And it can work in a positive way too, where you're trying to build something up from nothing. And I haven't been doing this that long. So the Super Santa illustrated novel collaboration goes back to 2022. And we published in 2023, the first edition. I broke the big book up into 3 little ones and did a second edition in 2024, just last year. That, if nothing else, precipitated my breakup with my collaborator, because I felt he just kind of checked out. And then I wrote the novel of my dreams just this year, Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine, as I mentioned. And it's a dream come true. It's what I always wanted to do, as I've ranted in other podcasts. So, great, I have arrived. I tell my son, who lives with me, about having a purpose in life. And you might realize it early, midlife, late life. But there's nothing more joyful and impactful than fulfilling your dream, which is, in a sense, aligning with your own destiny. And for me, that was always writing a novel, a full-length novel that I love. I think that it's stylistically unique. It's an expression of who I am. And I could, again, to the analogy I brought up before, I could show it to a homeless person or the Pope and be like, check this out, read this book. I just reached out randomly to a bunch of university professors that ChatGPT looked up for me, hoping that maybe one of them would take interest, because, I'm just trying whatever, and I'm not even trying that hard to market this book of my dreams. Part of me feels I've already done all the work. It's so hard to write it. It took me 40 years to figure out how to write the book I would like reading. So there, universe. But that's just the beginning. And I think that's the heart of my point, which is I need to grow up too. I need to grow up to the point where there's no dichotomy here. And I think Thomas Pynchon is like 88 years old. I think he lives in Manhattan. I used to always wonder if Thomas Pynchon and I, how close we got to each other at any given point. Like, what's the closest that Mookie Spitz and Thomas Pynchon have been to each other in physical reality? And he apparently lives in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan for like 11 years. So, how close have I ever gotten to Thomas Pynchon? I don't know. But he spent most of his time writing. He hasn't spent much of his time marketing. He's had his publisher market for him. He had his agent helping him out, whom he married. They have a kid, Jackson Pynchon. Imagine being Jackson Pynchon. I guess I could look him up, but, I don't know. That's like Wolfgang Van Halen. I hope Jackson Pynchon does not decide to write novels. That would be, it's always do something a little bit different. Like the Reitman father-son duo. The old guy did, those tacky 70s movies, comedies. The new guy, the son, did Thank You for Smoking and all those kind of indie films. So at least do it a little bit differently, Jackson. Anyway, how close was I to Thomas Pynchon? Well, Thomas Pynchon had the luxury of not really worrying about this shit because he actually did the opposite, as I hinted at earlier. I don't have that luxury, but in ways, the challenge, the throwdown makes me in my own way a better writer for me, a better creator for me. Necessity, again, being the mother of that invention. And that's where I'm at. So if you've been tracking so far, maybe you could identify with your own self, whether your career, whether what you're doing is one of stasis leading to the need for reinvention. This whole idea that we retire at a certain age or that we age out. It's a problem felt by everyone as they get older. Another friend of mine told me that one of his friends called him and said, hey, I think I'm retired. And that realization happened when all of his business deals just kind of went away. And he woke up in the morning and realized that life is pretty good and maybe he should go golfing or go boating or sailing or hiking or just not work. Good for him. I don't want to do that because I think my job, my career is technically only just beginning, which is, this is what I've always wanted to do, to crank this stuff out. And I wrote the first book of my dreams, and it's first in a series. I can't wait to hunker down and finish the second one. 5 books, at least as I've outlined it, along with a bunch of other books I want to write. And I don't mean to thin myself out with ranting and podcasts and on video on the side. It's not like you're one thing anymore. You just kind of do all this. But the final point I want to make is that even and especially because this world is so saturated by creators and the tools, the technology is so easy to use, and people have never consumed this much content, and then you throw in the AI generated content now in video, which will be its forefront watch, and then the devices where people engage with the world, namely glasses and other attachments that'll make smartphones look antiquated and kind of stupid like Betamax players. I even feature that in the ending of my science fiction book. I think it's a throwdown. It's an even more exciting time to be a creator because here's the thing. This is the essence of my hour-plus rant here. I can do it. You can do it. The Liquid Death guys did it. With a little bit of ingenuity and risk-taking that's inherent in the very brand attributes that I've been talking about. Think of something, an instantaneous, uninflected image and message that instantaneously conveys what you offer, disrupts the audience in a way where they stop, they pay attention, and they feel like they want a piece of you. The Mookie Spitz show ain't doing it. Bald Ambition ain't doing it. No Hair, No Heart ain't doing it. Mookie Spitz on Medium ain't doing it. Mookie Writer on TikTok. Well, I've got like 15,000 followers and 250,000 likes. That's not bad for Mookie Writer, but I could do so much better there too. I need to figure this out. I need to apply what I've known, apply what I've learned to myself. And that's hard. I feel like I'm the parent of me. Do as I say, now, not as I've done, so that I can do things which will help me say what I want not only myself to hear, but the world. This might be my biggest challenge, folks. I thought my biggest challenge was to write the book of my dreams. And here's what's utterly shocking and thrilling about this whole process. When you fight to realize the one goal that you've kept closest to your heart, and then get this, you accomplish it, and then you realize in a sudden yet obvious moment that goal was really a stepping stone to something else. Ooh, that's shocking and it's scary. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick and then plummeted into obscurity. It was a fail. The book was huge. It was mostly about whaling, at least on the surface. People didn't know what to make of it. And it sputtered and it vanished. And Melville found himself back to work on the docks. I think he was a customs inspector or something. And he kept writing. He kept writing about, he did the little novella, Billy, what is it? The Billy Bob novella, full of his own homoeroticism and unrequited expressions of relationships. He kept up his sarcastic and cynical approach to humanity. He used to always argue with his friend Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Scarlet Letter guy. Nathaniel Hawthorne was religious, believed in God, and believed that we were sinners, but the core of humanity was good. And Melville was like, no, there's pure evil. Most people suck. And I think Melville died discontent from what it seems. And here's the thing, pretty much forgotten. He was revitalized, I think, in like the 1912 or something by a university professor and reviewer who resuscitated his canon. They were thinking about trying to write the great American novel, and then they realized it was already written. It was Moby Dick. Who knew? And that was obviously before social media, let alone digital, internet, newspapers, magazines, libraries, people walking around. How did they communicate ideas? How did they disseminate content? Laborious, slow. Now we have the opposite problem. Everyone thinks they're Herman Melville. We're awash in content. How do you cut through this noise? Which begs the question of branding yourself in a way that stands out. There's a lot of companies, a lot of bottled water companies. Liquid Death did it through confusion, through contrarianness, through being a provocateur. And if you've listened to my stuff, that's where I'm at. I just say what's on my mind. I trigger a lot of people. I've been hovering at 600 followers on Instagram. I win a few and then they are instantly gone. And I seem to have peaked at 15,000 on TikTok for the same reason. I'll post a pro MAGA video and then I get 50 new followers, and then I make fun of the Donald and then I lose another 100. That's not the point, though. The point, though, is they're oscillating because there's no center. They're just seeing content devoid of a brand. And I need to brand myself up. No solutions here, at least not yet. But it's something for me to think about. And maybe it's something for you to think about too as your own life changes. How do you rebrand yourself in this crazy world? You don't have to be a content creator to need to do this, but as your own life changes, relationships, jobs, locations, life purpose, it's something that we all need to do. Some of us are better at it than others, and I really think many human problems might stem from our unwillingness or inability, at least we think, to brand thyself. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, share. And I would be thrilled if I could come back and announce the new Mookie Spitz. Wish me luck. It's really not that big a lift. And at least I could just throw it out there, give it a whirl, right? Fail fast, be bold. And then you might strike gold. I just saw a video on evolution with Stephen Wolfram being interviewed. Evolution, natural selection, not random, folks. It's built into the system if you look at it computationally. Just keep throwing stuff against the wall. If you follow the rules, it's gonna happen.